I work at a small residential psychiatric rehab center. I've been working here since I was only 18 years old, and I'm nearly 30 now. I have a lot of crazy stories that I could tell. Scary ones too. I've had to fight for my life quite a few times. There are only about 12 residents at any given time, and a lot of them end up staying for many years at a time, and so we have pretty strong relationships with most of them. The thing that caused me to gravitate towards this line of work was my own personal experience. My mother was a paranoid schizophrenic, always afraid somebody was watching her to kill her. Her delusions got super intense towards the end of her life. I found her when I was just 12 years old. She had absolutely mutilated herself. Her intestines were strewn, and she had cut so deep into her wrist that she had scratches on her bones. It was the most horrific sight I'd ever seen in my entire life, and the image still haunts me to this day. After that, I vowed to help people like her. I never wanted another kid to find their parents dead like I did. I was sitting in the office around 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. Lynn walked back into the office. She had just done the rounds for this hour. She sat at the other computer with a heavy sigh. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Melanie was being weird," she responded. "Weird? How?" I saw Lynn pause to think through her response before answering. She said that a man had been standing in her doorway at night. Melanie has schizophrenia, and so she hallucinates sometimes. This was not an unusual thing for her to say. "She's probably just hallucinating," Lynn continued. "Yeah, probably," I agreed. Lynn grabbed her things to head out. The rest of the night went flawlessly, and I headed home around midnight. I got a call from my supervisor around 9 a.m. the next day. I wasn't scheduled until 6 p.m., so I wasn't sure why he was calling. "Hello?" "Steve, I need you to come in." "Is everything okay?" I asked, sitting up in bed, my heart racing a bit. Was I in trouble? "Melanie tried to kill herself this morning." "My God, is she okay?" I asked, completely startled at this revelation. Melanie had never shown any suicidal intentions or tendencies at all. She tried to kill herself. It didn't make sense. "Please, just come in," my supervisor repeated. "Okay, I'll be there in an hour." I hung up the phone and I got out of bed. The whole ride over, a million thoughts raced through my head. Why? How? When? None of this made any sense. She was fine when Lynn had checked on her last night, and had been sound asleep when I checked on her at 11. I parked my car and I sighed as I prepared myself to walk into work. I wasn't sure what to expect. I headed inside and I went straight to the office. My supervisor, Will, was seated at the far computer. A crying Lynn sat at the other. "What happened?" I asked, taking a seat in between the two of them. "Martin found her hanging in her room around 1 this morning. She had made a noose from her bedsheet. It seemed as though he had found her after she had stopped breathing. They're trying to save her." I didn't have the ability to process a response. Not a moment later, one of the other patients, Tim, had busted through our office door. "He's here." Will rolled his eyes slightly. "Who?" Tim had suffered a stroke when he was younger, and it left him with the thinking capacity of a 4-year-old. He couldn't form full sentences. "Him." Tim said with a loudness that made me flinch. Okay, Tim, we're talking right now. We will come see it in a minute, Will said softly. Okay. Tim responded and closed the door behind him. Will took a deep breath. I've been here since this morning, and I don't have anybody to help Lynn cover the day shift. I need you to help her. Martin will come in early tonight, and I'll do the other half of the night shift. I nodded as he stood up and headed towards the door. He paused and looked back. Please do rounds every half an hour today, just in case. Lynn and I both nodded and Will left. I looked at Lynn after. Are you okay? Yeah, she shrugged. She was okay yesterday though. Well, she was being symptomatic, I said. But she's never done that before. Yeah, I nodded as I pondered for a moment. I heard Tim yelling from down the hall and I sighed heavily. I'm gonna go see what Tim is going on about. Lynn nodded and turned towards the computer to finish writing her note. I walked down to Tim's room and froze in the hallway. Tim had cut his arm with something. He had drawn on the walls with his own blood. I remember a chill running down my spine as I saw what he put on the wall. He's here. Tim can't write. I immediately grabbed the first aid kit to fix up his arm. Tim, why did you do this? He did. Who? I asked, having my suspicion that it might be Alex down the hall. He had violent tendencies, though usually he left Tim alone. Him, Tim said, offering no clarification. I sighed as I finished wrapping his arm up. I cleaned up his wall and I headed back to the office. I looked around for Lynn, but I found her nowhere. I sat down and I began notes at my computer. She returned a few minutes later and slumped into her chair. Everything okay? I asked. Victor said he saw something go into Tim's room earlier. I sat up. Did he say who? He couldn't tell. I just found Tim. His arm was all cut up and somebody had written on the wall with his blood. Lynn sat up as well. Oh my god, is he okay? Yeah, he's fine. Just kept saying that it was him. Who? Just him. I think it may have been Alex. Yeah, probably. Lynn sighed. We'll have to go talk to him. I nodded and I finished up my notes until it was time to do rounds again. It was almost lunchtime and most of the residents were awake by now. I checked in on everyone, but only Alex remained in his room sleeping. Victor stepped out to greet me. Hello, Steve. I turned and smiled. Hey, Victor, what's up? Victor shrugged. Not much. I saw somebody go into Tim's room. Yeah, I said. Lynn told me. Did you see who? No, too dark. The hall? Him. Victor had some race-based illusions and really had issues with anybody with a darker complexion. I figured this was manifesting when he saw what I now assumed to be a hallucination go into Tim's room. Oh, okay, well, thanks for letting us know, I said before going into the kitchen to start lunch. I was making sandwiches when I saw someone enter the room. I didn't look up for a few minutes, but when I did, I saw Alex standing there, just staring. Hey Alex, is everything okay? I asked, a little on edge. Alex shook his head, but he said nothing. What's going on? I asked again. Alex handed me a drawing that he had done. I took it and I analyzed it greatly. Alex drew a lot to express himself, and he was actually a pretty talented artist. I was surprised to see this drawing though. Alex had drawn a black figure, roughly human-shaped. However, there were tentacles coming out from the torso and long horns on its head. It had no facial features except for a too-wide grin that was filled with razor-sharp teeth. At the top, Alex had written, "He's here." I looked back up at Alex. "What is this?" I asked. "It's him," Alex replied before taking his drawing back and leaving the kitchen. I stood there in shock for a moment before shaking it off and resuming the sandwiches. You see a lot of weird stuff in places like this, and it can be easy to get worked up, but I've learned how to shake things off over the years. It makes the job much more bearable. Everyone came into the kitchen to eat, except for Victor. It wasn't like him to miss a meal, and so I headed to his room to search for him. The scene that I found was nothing short of horrific. Victor had taken the crayons which we had allowed them to have to write in color with and jammed several of them into his eyes. He was writhing in agony on the floor. I ran over and knelt down. "Victor, what did you do?" I couldn't stand to see him anymore. He cried out as I pulled my cell phone out and I called 911. He continued to cry out as I stayed on the phone, waiting for an ambulance. They hauled him away, and I sighed deeply as Lynn came up behind me. "What a day," she said softly. I chuckled lightly and I walked off to do my rounds, trying to take my mind off of everything. I went into Renee's room at the end of the hall. Renee was very sociable and was only diagnosed with anxiety and depression. Of course, it was debilitating at the level she felt these things, but she did not hallucinate, which is the most important. She was gone at some doctor appointment with her mother, so she wasn't in there. I paused when I found a journal laying open on her desk. A similar picture to the one Alex had drawn was scribbled on the page, along with a short note. "He will come for all of us. He's here." I looked around the room, but I saw nothing out of place. Renee seemed to be living like she always had, but this journal entry was troubling. I only had a few hours left in my shift and I just wanted to relax. Everyone seemed okay and I headed to the office. I completed some notes before taking off for the day. I went home, anxious about working the following night. I hadn't heard anything more about Victor, but I hoped that he would be okay. Renee hadn't returned when I had left either. I went to bed and I got a pretty restless night of sleep. I dragged myself out of bed around noon the next day and mentally prepared myself to go to work. I got dressed and I started my meal prep for my lunch. It was almost 5 when I headed out of the door for work. I arrived to find Lynn in the office. She looked up as I came in the door. "Hey, what's up?" I said, sitting my lunchbox down on my desk. "Renee still isn't home. She must have stayed at her mom's." I nodded. "And Victor?" She shrugged. "I haven't heard anything." I nodded and I sat back in the chair as Lynn gathered her things and left. I hoped it would be a quiet night. I was alerted to screaming around 10 p.m. I ran out of the office to find a hysterical Marie in the hall. "Marie, what's going on?" "I don't want to go," she yelled, curling up in a ball on the floor. Other residents began to poke their heads out of the rooms. "Go where?" I asked softly, trying to remain neutral and calm. With him. I don't want to," she cried. I knelt down beside her and helped her up. "You aren't going anywhere," I said softly as I led her back to her room. I helped her into bed and I gave her a Xanax to help her calm down. She sniffled and she relaxed a bit. "He's here," she whispered before falling asleep. I returned to the office. Marie never woke up again. Apparently, she had some undiagnosed heart condition that had stopped her heart the night before. A freak thing, they had said. The next day, we had a small memorial with the residents for Marie. It was at that time that my supervisor got a call. He stepped out of the room to take it. He was gone a few minutes before he came back in, looking as pale as a ghost. He pulled Lynn, Martin, and I aside and spoke in a hushed tone. That was Renee's father. Her and her mother got into a car accident after Renee's appointment. They both died on impact. Lynn gasped and Martin and I took deep breaths. What was going on around here? This would be hard news for the residents to hear, especially after losing Marie not a day ago. Lynn shed some tears and excused herself to the office, as Martin and I put on braced faces to finish the memorial. The following day, we received word that Melanie had succumbed to her injuries as well. 3 residents had died in a week. I had been there for 11 years and only saw one person die the entire rest of the time. Victor was released from the hospital, but they weren't able to save his eyes. He spent days locked up in his room, not coming out for anything. Weeks passed and all of the residents began to mention this mysterious him. I had found "He's here" written nearly everywhere I looked. In the mirror with toothpaste, on the walls with crayon, even on the dining table with peas. Lynn began to act stranger as the weeks went on. I figured the stress of recent events had gotten to her. She sat down at her computer. "He's here." "Who?" "Him. The thing everyone sees," she said, almost frantic. "What are you talking about?" She took a deep breath and looked over at me. "Him. He's dark, not a human. He says he wants to take me home." I raised my eyebrows in disbelief. "Lynn, are you good? Maybe you need to take some time off." "I know what I saw." I held up my hands in defense and I didn't say anything more. Lynn shot herself after work that evening. She had never struggled with any mental illnesses and was one of the happiest people that I'd known. Time went on and more residents had encounters with him. I had never seen anything, and neither had Martin. We didn't know what was going on, but the residents were all scared. We decided that it may be best to move them to a new facility. Changing the environment can sometimes help delusions and those sort of things. I had just woken up around 5 a.m. when I saw that I had a text from Martin from a few minutes earlier. It only said 2 words. "He's here." I tried calling him, but he wouldn't answer. I rushed to work to find the building completely engulfed in flames. I called 911 and they raced over as fast as they could. It wasn't fast enough. There were no survivors. They said that they weren't sure how the fire had started, but believed that it could have been arson. I had known Martin for nearly 10 years. He didn't do this. I had lost nearly everyone I knew in just a few short months. And to top it all off, as I was driving home, I thought I saw the silhouette in my back seat. I looked back again, but there was nothing there. I'm terrified for my life because I fear this thing is real. I feel like there's one last thing you should know that will clarify my fear even more. My mother left a suicide note all those years ago. On it, only 2 words. He's here.